Okay. Uh, this is not a show. Like, I don't have a name for this show. This is just a, like, I wanted to talk to you.
Uh-huh.
And so here we are talking about your book, Songs of My Grandmother. Sarah, it's really nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you
Um,
again too.
yeah, so that was the most formal part of this entire conversation. Now we get to just talk about stuff. Um, yeah, so like, oh God, last time we spoke, you were on my show Shareable, which is going through a full scale reboot.
Hmm.
And then I have Rogue, which is kind of in hiatus, and they're both coming back very, very soon. But in the meantime, I was like, gotta talk to you. And the fact that you released a book is, as you know, I only have one book as well. First time author stuff is this is big.
Hmm.
Writing a book is putting so much of yourself into it and into the world.
Yeah.
And honestly, I felt that way about my book. And then I read your book and I was like, oh man, I left a lot of me on the table. Hey, little dude. Um, and I'm really jazzed to talk to you about your book. Before we jumped on, I was saying this is like way outside of my normal wheelhouse of books. I have like a pretty predictable groupings of books. I read almost all nonfiction, and I read a lot of um, like I go through kind of phases. I went through like very businessy stuff, and then I went through a lot of like society, like race and gender, and various like intersectional related topics. And then I kind of went to like learning and stuff. And so anyway, point being is that like I tend to read a certain type of book. And when your book came out, I was like, well, obviously I'm going to buy it to support you, and I want to see what it's all about. And then I'm going to divulge to you a calculated misstep on my part. So, whenever I talk to someone about a book, I try to read the entire book like week and a half, week before, so that it's like real fresh in my mind. And so I did that. However, this book, this book is incredible, I have to say, first of all. And I'm not just saying this. I couldn't get through every part of it because I had to pour over certain parts of it
Mm.
multiple times. And I have multiple notes here. This book is like gushing with relatable human experiences. And like the way you capture it in words is both poetic and authorly. I don't know the right way to say it, but it's like you are blending in a poetic way of explaining things.
Mm.
Um, and there's so much I want to talk to you about. So I don't know where you want to go with this conversation, but I figured it would just be cool to talk about stuff. I have a bunch of notes here
Yeah, go
and
for
stuff.
it. Wherever you want to go.
Okay,
I'm
so
open.
oh man, there's so much here. Well, I want to actually just start here. What made you decide to write the book? Like, so there's
Yeah.
just so much in here, and maybe you know what? Start here. Tell people who would be watching this or listening what's the book about.
Yeah. So it's a what's it about and how it came to be are both two different equally crazy stories. When I explain what's it about, it's called Songs of My Grandmother, but my grandmother thinks the book's about her, but it's not. It's about all the things not only that I don't know about her, but about how my I am probably one of the first people in my entire lineage who's had the ability to be out of survival mode, and experience the range of human emotions and express them and share with others and publish a book about it, right? But this whole book is about what it means to be human. It's about belonging, it's about longing, it's each chapter is divided into a different color, and each color is a different feeling. And even then, the whole premise of the book, if you, and this isn't a spoiler, and is that every feeling falls into every color and every emotion. And even if something's in yellow, which is more of like acceptance, like it bleeds into grief and it bleeds into joy. And like even the heaviest, I think some of the heaviest pieces for me to write and to read over, when I read them, I also feel warm, even if it's very heavy. So like that's kind of it's how I process emotion, right? And some of it's like how I process emotion actually, and some of it's like how it's what I needed to tell myself when I was going through it. Um, and how it came to be is a lot of the writing, as you could probably tell, like, um, was during the pandemic. There are a lot of pandemic remnants in the writing, right? Like references to masks, 6 feet apart. And it actually started because the how it actually started was I realized that I didn't trust myself. And I had this nonprofit, She Is Universe, and we are doing these workshops for girls during the pandemic. And I met this author named Jenna Brighton, and she did this thing saying, if you write 100 words a day for 100 days, then that'll develop this trust with yourself. I, as an ADHDer, cannot do one thing for 100 days. So my 100-day challenge took like 300 days because there were times I skipped it for a day and then it was like, I'm not doing this again. And then I went back to it and I skipped it for a week. And there was a time where I skipped it for a month. And it took me like 300 days to do this. And that's where a lot of these vignettes came from, is from just writing something and showing up every day. But when I was writing these things, it was what I needed to hear. Like I did not, although I love writing and although I was like, one day I hope to publish a book, that wasn't the intention when I was writing any of it. And the way that I got a book deal as well, also crazy. Like I also from the book, there's it starts one of the vignettes, everything is kind of vague. The whole purpose is that it's divided by color instead of chronology or space or anything. So even if there was one story that happened, I often cut it up and put it in different places to make it match by what color it evoked rather than focusing on time and space. And because of that, there's a piece at the beginning and I talk a bit about like Sunday mornings, like Sunday at 11 a.m. And I had experienced an attack on the subway in New York City. And through
I was
that,
going
I
to ask you,
had,
that's a true story, that one that's in
yeah,
there?
yeah. Oh, it's all true stories. Yeah. I mean, just like, but that's a true story. And it's ironic that I live in New York City now, but that left me with PTSD. And one of the ways that I processed that was through dancing. But I, as someone who processes through emotion, my emotion through writing, could not write for a year. Could not write. And during the process where I couldn't write, my friend was like, "Oh, so there's this writing competition that's through a Google form." And like essentially, like I applied to this fellowship through this Google form, got the fellowship, submitted something for my book, and it was like mostly the first poem of the book, my song, The I Am an Implant, submitted that, got this book deal with no, I had never published any writing before. So I had mad imposter syndrome because I had like zero following, had not published anything before. And so that people knew about me because you could tell that from searching me. You're like, okay, this girl has like not much of an Instagram following and she has not published any creative writing before. On top of that, what people didn't know was that I couldn't write. I couldn't
At
write.
the
Like
time, you mean?
at the time I couldn't
Yeah.
write. So when I got in this book deal, most of it was compiling and
Hmm.
compiling things from the past. And then writing as well, but it was like again what I needed to hear.
Hmm.
So publishing this in the world was terrifying. I didn't want to tell anyone that I was writing this book because I was like, "Ooh, this book is actually not for you. It's for me," because it felt so raw to put myself out there in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many things. One of the first things I have clipped here as like a piece was from that first poem.
Hmm.
There's a piece here where you say, "Not connected to the land I've never grown up on, only visited. Not connected to the land I've grown up on, always felt like a visitor, and yet connected to both through a hyphenated identity that, like the water between two lands, divides me."
Yeah.
And like you, this is in like your opening pages that you're like dropping
Yeah.
stuff like that, and I'm not surprised that if that's how, if like that's some of the stuff that you were sending in, that someone that they took notice. I would, again, this is a book that's way outside of my normal thing, but as I was reading it, I just kept thinking of different people that I wanted to read it, and I
Hmm.
dog-eared a whole bunch of pages in here. And even before we jumped on, there was one poem that I had to have my wife read, who
Hmm.
may or may not be able to join us for part of this, but it was the poem "Martyrs." I think it's,
Hmm.
yeah, "Martyrs," because she's actually doing a talk right now about generational trauma and breaking free and reclaiming your identity and all of like the things that you learn and unlearn. And
Hmm.
then there's parts, you have this poem called "January 6th" that is haunting. And also, it's interesting you brought up the part about how you took stories and spread them throughout the book and how you don't really think of this in a linear fashion, but you're using color and themes. Because as I was reading January 6th, and it starts out with you as an 8-year old, and then you shift time to present day, it was a real head trip. I actually had to read it like several times and be
Mm.
like, to gather like the flow of it. And it was like haunting and brilliant. Um, but this book that you at one point you said were like, reluctant to share with people or to
Mhm.
tell people that, like, I think you should be shouting it from the rooftops, because I know that, um, I think through a certain lens, I would not be the audience for this because of the experiences that you've had that I have never had to. But there's so much in here that's like deeply human and like experienced by any and all of us. You have this poem, Hollow.
I knew you were gonna say that. I
Yeah.
had a weird feeling you were gonna say
I
that.
have
Okay.
like so many of them dog eared, but like that one
Hmm.
was like, I felt like that one was like one that you could have written as me,
Hmm.
to me, for me. And I have that one set aside here too as well, or if you want to read it. But that one was like, I, I, I think what I'm so amazed by in this is how you've been able to write it for yourself, for anyone, for like no one and anyone and
Hmm.
someone specific all at once. Um, Colors. Sorry, I'm also ADHD, so I'm all over the place with this, but colors.
Just
So
put.
it's interesting you brought up the point about how all of the emotions are in all of the colors. I wanted to know where your associations from the colors came from, because
Yeah.
you have a little blurb about them in the beginning, and I associate with a lot of these colors differently.
Hmm.
And I also thought it was interesting that you had red lipstick inside of yellow.
Yes.
That was fascinating. But tell me about even just where the colors thing came from in this, because I think it's a really unique way of breaking up
Hmm.
a book of not all poetry, not all story. It's like a mixture of all these things, and it's divided up by color and emotion. And it's like you're layering in a very unique structure. And I'm curious where that started and how your associations to color, because you're very clear about what they mean to you. So I'm
Yeah.
curious where that came from.
And also, like at the beginning, it says, I'm so open, like, please challenge the way that I see things. And I want people to see things differently. Especially, I love that you commented on the red lipstick in yellow. And one reason for that is like how, well, going back to just the colors in general, is like, I feel like when you don't feel anything, right? Like sometimes we're so disassociated or like I think about like so many people have complex trauma from the pandemic. A lot of healthcare workers, educators, people in general, like um and even if they don't, there are so many times people experience these periods in their life where instead of living in color, you feel like you're living in pastels. That maybe, and nothing is horribly wrong, but maybe you're still experiencing, so if emotions were colors, maybe you're still experiencing like happiness, but instead of this exuberance, you're just experiencing a very muted version of all of your feelings. And sometimes it's nice because you don't experience grief in the same depth, or you don't experience anger in the same depth, but you also don't experience joy in the same depth. You can't selectively mute the colors. It's just you choose to live in color, you choose to live in pastels, or you choose to live in black and white. And so part of it was thinking of that, like, what does it mean to live in pastels? And this like aching to kind of feel more. And I think that's kind of where this idea of us trying to look for colors and things and feelings. And I think sometimes like um so right now I'm in this grad program for like art psychotherapy, and I work in an inpatient psych unit, and I ask my patients like, okay, what color are you feeling today? Because sometimes like asking someone how they're feeling is such a limiting question, because you sometimes you just don't have the words for it, right? It's easier to be like, okay, what are you feeling like today? I wish I was a bird.
Well, especially I would imagine in an inpatient facility, you have people who are dealing potentially with complex
Totally.
mental related. I have often associated with my emotions intellectually. Like
Mm-hmm.
I am intellectualizing the experience of the emotion I'm feeling. There's like a cold detachment at times from it. And the point you made about the pastels was, I think, I think it's such an accurate way of describing what it feels like when you mute both ends of that spectrum of like the
Exactly.
happiness and the sadness. I remember a period post high school where I was going through that because I had a traumatic issue where my mom got into this epic car accident on my last day of high school. And then I realized like 6 years later that I had been living in what I think the language that I'll now use for it is in pastel, right? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, there was no vivid lows and there were no vivid highs. It was just kind of like this middle ground, like, but taking off the tops and the bottoms of everything.
Exactly.
So I thought that's a very vivid way of describing it.
Yeah. And like imagine if I think it's also questioning. I like to change the way we think about things. And sometimes it's like it sometimes adds even it's like what you said, you're writing for everyone and no one at the same time. And sometimes a color is just that. Like if someone's like, I'm really feeling purple, that is so specific. And also, what the heck does that mean? And it is up to that individual who said that to add context to that. And sometimes they need to and sometimes they don't, right?
Yeah. I
So,
also think it's interesting because I associate very heavily with red as my power color. I actually wore
mm,
this specifically for you.
love.
Also for myself because I love wearing red. But I find that when there's times where I feel like I need a little extra jolt, I essentially put on something red. I have a special pair of red Spider-Man boxers, for instance, when I do keynotes. That like that's my way of like getting
Mm,
into my zone, right? And what made me think of that is that you used a very specific word here about like you use the word choose. Like, do we choose to look for more color?
mm,
And I think I can see that from one perspective that like we can choose to look for more color and brightness and like those sort of descriptive ways of seeing the world. But sometimes it can feel, especially when you're trapped in that pastel, that you can't even see the colors.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious just your reflection on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Sometimes you don't, when you're in it, it's hard. It's like when you have, it's like wearing sunglasses. It's like when you have my sunglasses on or sepia sunglasses on, the whole world looks sepia, or blue lens or like a green lens. You don't notice it. Like nothing is green when everything is green. Nothing is red when everything is red. Sometimes you don't even notice when you're in it. It's only when you can step out of it that you can realize it. And that's what the word choose is so important because sometimes you can't choose. Like when you say living in pastels, that's not a choice
It's like you
at
don't even
all.
notice
It's
that
how
you're
you're.
wearing the sunglasses. It's like
No.
that's what it is. There it is.
Yeah.
Do you think? I guess we're getting into like deep psychotherapy
It's okay.
realm here, but like,
We
do
can go
you think
there.
it's possible, in general, for people to look through these kind of lenses of? Do you see this as a potential vehicle? I guess you're in an art psychotherapy program, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this potentially like a method by which people can kind of more actively choose how they want to feel, how they address how they're feeling, if they want to make a change in how they're feeling?
Yeah, I think it can be a step or a tool in the toolkit. I think sometimes when it comes to living in pastels, like it's like when you're disassociated after trauma or during trauma. Like sometimes it's how your body stays safe, right? And sometimes you don't have a choice. Most of the time, we don't have a choice in how we respond or how our body responds to things and how our body wants us to feel safe. And and there can still be tools that give us language for it. So for example, you mentioned hollow, right? And I can read it because I feel like I
Yeah,
can
it's such a
explain any of
good
these
it
things.
is such a good poem, and um, it was one of the ones that there are so many good poems in here, but like this is one that when I read it, I felt so connected to you in that moment, and like the what
Hmm.
you wrote there, I was like, oh wow, that is an experience that I know intimately here,
Hmm.
and like even just it like literally the very first paragraph is it hit.
Would you like to read it?
No, I would like you to read it
Okay, I was
actually.
like, I'm always curious about it.
I would, but I feel like these are your words, and even though they resonate with me, you have you read, please.
Read them. It's
Yeah.
interesting because I remember where I wrote every single one of these. You could ask me, you
Ooh,
could
where
put
did
to
you write?
any page. Oh, this one
Yeah,
was
where'd you write this one?
on a plane going to Boston, and it was like a fall day.
Okay, so then after you read this, I'm curious to know the story behind it.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
like what inspired it to happen,
Yeah.
especially like on the plane, like what triggered it.
Yeah. So I can read it first, then I can
Yeah.
I can tell. So it's called Hollow. From the outside, no one can tell. I'm a marble statue with all the rough edges smoothed over. I laugh when I'm supposed to laugh. Ask me for an idea, and I'll give you 3. I know how to be me, so I wake up every day auditioning to be myself. I'm great at it and get better every day. Yet the inside of me is hollow and filled with water. All I want is a hug, but I stop myself when I see you because I'm scared that if I feel too safe, I'll pour all over. And this one for me was about, at the time I was teaching students in Boston at the Kennedy School, and I felt like I, as someone who's an educator and a facilitator, the room takes the energy, it takes the same energy as you show up with. So I had to show up with energy to energize students every, like, twice a week. And I was showing up with energy, and I'm almost performing a little bit, as sometimes you do in like these spaces, because you have to be like the same consistent energy every time. Because if someone starts to worry about you, then that changes the dynamic of the room and shifts the attention. And I felt like there were so many moments where I was living in pastels during this, where someone would say something and I would be like, I don't like, or someone would say something really disturbing or sad or heartbreaking, and I would want to empathize with them, and I couldn't because I didn't have access to that emotion. But I know that this person knows me as an empathetic person. So I had to think, like, what would Sarah do in this moment? And I'm like, oh, I would probably go like this and, like, not back and forth. And I felt like I was performing to be myself, because if I let my guard down, then people around me would worry, and then I would have to take care of people, which is fine, but I didn't know what was going enough inside of me or how to articulate that in a way for it to be helpful for someone else. Because nothing felt wrong. I just felt numb to everything. And I felt like it was so easy to do that with people I didn't know. But if I called my mom or talked to my best friend, the second I showed up, they would know
Yeah.
that I wasn't me. And I would break down, and I just didn't want to.
It's interesting because
Yeah.
throughout your book, there's so much around, especially like if you look at that poem Martyrs, and there's so much about like putting other people's comfort in front of your own, difficulty of establishing boundaries, difficulty prioritizing your own needs. There's identity, there's belonging, there's all these different things, these themes that just run through it. And it's interesting as I read that one, even though I have a very different, like, I guess the story that I came to with this and like the way that I was thinking about it is obviously very different from yours.
Tell me more. Yeah, I'm curious.
So, I'll just say the last thing, which is that, but it also felt very much like I understand that piece, the piece about like the performance, right? So like for me, this is where my head went with this one, why I thought it was, like why it resonated with me. So all throughout like high school, I remember feeling like the value that I brought was that I could make people laugh. Like I had the class clown thing, right? And that was how I knew that I could keep people around, because I was otherwise, I feel like I did awkward things. And at that time, I didn't know I was also autistic. I just knew I was ADHD at some point around them. But like I knew that I had a little bit more difficulty keeping friends, and I felt like I was always a little bit on the outside, right? And so I felt like a lot of the times what I was doing was performing to be the version of myself that would work, that would be accepted, that would be allowed in the group, to be allowed to stay, that could keep friends, all of those different things. And like I said about the I laugh when I'm supposed to laugh. Ask me for an idea, I'll give you 3. I also feel like there's a certain expectation of like what people's strengths and weaknesses and gifts are. And that even when you're empty, sometimes you feel like you have to still show up and give that thing because that's what other people rely on you for. And, you know, the reasons that I do that, I think, are going to come from a different place than obviously where yours came from. I think a lot of I have this like intense desire to like save the world, right? Like to make the world a better place, to help people always, and like superhero stuff, right? Is always like embedded in that, like, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So if I can help someone, I should. And sometimes even if I'm empty, it means I should, right? And I know how to be me, so I wake up auditioning to be myself. I'm great at it. I get better every day. Is sort of like it gets easier and easier to meet those expectations of other people and to do the thing that's expected of you that they need, whatever, all the while that you begin to, you're not attending to yourself. So you're withering a bit. You're getting more hollow inside, right?
Yeah.
And that last part, if I feel too safe, I'll pour all over, is like that, the dam, right? That, like, behind it, right there, that if somebody just says, hey, are you okay? And you're like, yeah, I'm good. And they're like, no, really? Like, are you okay? Like that thing, when you're in that moment where you're feeling like you've just been doing the act and putting yourself out there and trying to meet all the expectations, whatever, and playing the part of what you're supposed to be. And then just sometimes you just want to, like, be a freaking mess. You just want to like just be okay to just not be productive, to not meet expectations, to not be a good anything, to just be able to be you in whatever state you're in so you can recover or just be, right? So, like, I feel like everybody should be able, I would assume, to read that poem, to read that entry in it and relate to it in their unique way of feeling like they have to meet some expectation. They have to, you know, to show up in those scenarios.
Totally. And that's what I love is, like, I love listening to people's interpretations of things that I wrote. And I love seeing how, because I think there's one thing to write something, but when you read something, it becomes yours, you know? Because you don't read my writing with my interpretation, you read it with yours.
Yeah.
So not only, it's like my words, but you colored them, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know,
Especially
with your
to have colored
experiences.
them.
I
Especially
know.
again, it's a
Ha.
thematic. Yeah.
So it's like you color them with your own experiences.
But
So
in
thank
a
you
way,
for
you're
sharing
also
that.
then, to a certain extent, you're kind of painting others with color in the sense, because, like, so, like, for instance, you know, my business partner and my wife, I've told both of them different things about my experience as someone with ADHD, right? And now they both use this similar language of, like, there's just things I can't unsee now, right? And that shapes how they relate to other people in the world. Like, they'll meet someone like, oh, this person isn't lazy. They may be experiencing some executive dysfunction, or maybe this person isn't being difficult, they're sensory overload, or whatever it might be, right? And so there's things that you can't unsee, right? And one of the things that I explained to them was the way that I relate to time is like now and not now, right? And so that little phrase, now, not now, is like a thing that my wife and I now say. She's like, right, now, not now. I'll put it on your calendar, right? And there are things throughout your book that I think are very similar. And one that I wrote down that I'm going to keep, like, this is a mine now, I take this, is the thing that your friend Maya said. Each friend is a universe. When you make a new friend, there's a whole new universe waiting to be explored. And it's like a deeper, richer, vivid imagery of the idea of, like, you never know what someone's going through until you walked a mile in their shoes. But it's like this idea of, like, the cosmos of a person's experience. And, like, when you think about, at least for me, when I think about the idea of, like, walking in another person's shoes, like, while I'm willing to do it and I understand the importance of it, and empathy is, like, a critical skill and everything, that particular idea of, like, walking in somebody else's experience, it's not particularly, like, inviting. Whereas like exploring the universe is like this fascinating sort of angle on it, right? Where it's like, it's a different, the language changes how you relate to that thing, right? And the idea of a person being a universe to explore is like, it's like a frontier, an unknown. It's this expansive, colorful, mysterious thing, as opposed to this, like, oh, so you've had tough experiences too, which is how I think a lot of people can take it.
Yeah.
And there's not a wonder or a fascination in that. There's a I don't know, process.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that exactly, right? It's like, how do we, not only is the goal to feel more human, but how do we see that humanity in others? Like, how, and I think that is a choice, right? Sometimes feeling more human may not be your choice at the moment, but choosing to see in the humanity in others, that's a choice.
Yeah. there's so much in your book I also appreciated about your book. You address what's going on in the world
Mhm.
very
Yeah.
like specifically, directly, and openly. And I really appreciate that you didn't pull any punches on any of it throughout it, because, and I think this is probably one of the benefits because I feel like I had a similar, although much more like like my audience was like business audience, and I was thinking about
Mhm.
like, well, how can I use this entire time? But like for yours as an expression and like a connection to humans, like I think it was very important that you did this. But
Hmm.
there was like a a boldness to addressing the different things and to um, in the midst of everything that you have in here that's like connecting to a human experience, you're also you're creating a space for people to see what's going on in the world through that same lens.
Hmm.
You mentioned that this book kind of came together a lot through curation,
Mhm.
through just writing regularly. How much of what this book came to be in the end was the purpose all along, like the sort of where you thought it would go as you were assembling it, versus how much of it kind of came together in the act of doing it versus kind of happy accidents? Like how do you feel about the
Oh
final
yeah.
product in that? And you
Um
can explain it with colors if you want.
yeah, yeah. I feel like I didn't write this book. I think this book wrote me. Um and I say that because it's not, or like even like, I mean, it would be silly to say 100% was a happy accident, but I think that I say that when I say that, what I mean is that there was not a single line in this book was written um unintentionally. Like, not a single line. There was never a moment where I was like, I have to sit down and write because I have to do this. Like, there were moments where the acknowledgments, for example, I think it's my favorite part of the book, but I submitted the acknowledgments 2 months after my deadline that we had for it, um, because it didn't. And luckily, my team was so, like, we were all on the same team, and we all had the same vision, and they were so open to that because I was like, I can't write. I can't write something because I have to. I have to write something because I want to. And I don't know about this part. The dedication, I changed it at the last minute, um, because I was like, wait, what feels good to me? And every moment I feel like in that process was like, okay, well, what needs to come out? What, and I feel like the book was writing me because I felt like the funniest thing was like I thought of the ideas of the colors, for example, even though I didn't know what they meant until I wrote them. And even though a lot of it was curation, I thought that I would, oh, as I was submitting chapters to my editor, I thought I would submit the red chapter first because I had so much. I was like, oh, like red, red encompasses a lot. There must be a lot in it. But, or like the yellow chapter, right? I was like, oh, there's like so much yellow, right? But, and I didn't have as much um, blue, indigo, violet. But as I began the process of writing the book, my journey followed the colors in
Mm.
the way that I submitted it, which I never would have expected. And so it felt so organic, but also I feel like I didn't force myself to write anything. Like there was never a moment where, like, I think a lot of times people are like, even if it's like write every day or do something every day, there were, again, days or maybe even a week where I didn't do anything. But it felt like because I didn't write that for that whole year, this book, I feel like, saved me in the way that it gave me a place to put everything I was feeling. And it was such a sacred ritual in the process of writing it that it felt really nourishing, like I felt like, and for a long time I didn't tell people about this book. Maybe also because, like, um I think even though I love poetry and I'm a creative person, I think that my public persona is more academic or nonfiction or just these different things that people don't realize that I have emotions because they see, like in the poem Hollow, they see me making jokes or they see me giving ideas. They don't know that part of me exists. So for a long time, it was a secret relationship that I had. I felt like I had a secret relationship, that I was like secretly dating someone
Hmm.
or like married to someone, except the married thing I was married to was this book, and it felt like thing that I would like, um, I remember like a friend would be like, "Oh, do you want to hang out?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I have plans tonight." I wouldn't tell you, like, not that I was hiding it, but I was like, people don't get it,
Yeah.
and I don't know what I'm doing enough to explain it. And I think I made the mistake sometimes of like, there were very few people I shared the book idea with, who I knew would get it, because I knew I wasn't at a point where I felt secure enough to share people. And I say that because I think I shared a few things with some people who didn't were as receptive to it, and they were like, "Oh, I would never do that. It's too vulnerable."
Yeah.
And that completely shut me down. And I was like, you know what? This is like a sacred thing. And until I build the confidence to share with people, I'm going to share this idea with people who can hold it with me, instead of challenging me and telling people, like, who's going to buy that book if you don't have this or you don't have that? Like, I need nourishment. And there were people who were like watering the seeds of this book, but it felt really nice to have that to myself for a bit.
I hope you sell a ridiculous number of these books, but even if you don't, I hope you know that this book is important to have written and that just writing it was like enough.
Thank you.
And I mean that. Like I'm not being like pithy or blowing smoke or anything. I think it's your contribution. And it's an
Mm.
important contribution and it says things in a very deeply vulnerable way. Like what
Mm.
the first question I was going to ask you candidly before we even got on was like, are you okay? Like there are parts of it where I was like, because our first, like the first time we met and it was like, it was all happy times. We're both ADHDing out. We're podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Like whatever. And reading this gave me, you had like
Mm.
2.5 dimensionality to me prior to this. Three dimension. You were a person, like a full person, but like this is like you're a full person now. You
Mm-hmm.
have a rich history. You have a whole family. You have places you've been. You have associations with color that are different from mine, but experiences that we can both relate to. Like, so I think just the fact that you can put something out like that, that vulnerability allows other people to open up and to share more,
Yeah.
right? And I think the people who would say like, "Oh, I could never do that; it's too vulnerable," is because, well, maybe you need to read Sarah's book first, and then maybe you might. Like I know people that they wouldn't divulge that they're neurodivergent until I start blathering on about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they come to me and they're like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I'm this or I'm that," and I'm
Mm.
like, "That's cool. Like, welcome to the club. Like,
Mhm.
it's really great." So I think it's really just important for it to even be out there for the people that do discover it. It's gonna resonate. I know it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I hope you sell a million copies of this.
Thank you. And also, like, the thing is, Jeff, like, I mean, part of me hopes that too, but a bigger part of me is like, no, like, she's out in the world, like, it feels like enough. And the thing is that the person who wrote this book is not the person that I am now. Like, and so it's so interesting because I had a friend of mine when I was like editing, like in the final edits of the process, and I was like, "Hey, can you read the introduction of my book?" And he read the introduction, and he was like, "Sarah, it feels like 5 different people wrote this intro." And I was like, "Oh my god, I love that because that's so true." Like, to read this book is to see so many different versions of myself. Like, and you could tell by the changes in because there was a period where I was writing more prose than like more poetry, and there are periods where things rhyme, or there are periods where like I'm really, really into trees or the ocean, or there was a period. So it's like I see this and I'm like, oh wow, like there are so many different parts of me. And it's not like this part of me is this part and that part of me that part. It's like what you said about the January 6th poem next to my mother's dreams. It's like right next to each other.
Yep.
Everything is right next to each other. And it's like this, like the most recent thing in this book was written a year ago because of how like it takes like a year to go through
Yeah.
publishing and edits, right? So like there is so much of me now that's not even in this book. And so it's crazy to think that for me it's like wow, like it's like the song for my granddaughter at the very end. Like that for me was a letter I wrote to the reader, whoever's reading the book. Um, but that's also a letter to all the versions of you and all the versions of me. Like, it's because initially I was the first reader of this book, you know? But then, like, when I go back, I'm still a reader of this book. Like, it's to you now, but it's to you in 10 years, and it's to you, like, 10 years ago. And so it's like this. it is exciting because just for me writing that as a reminder is enough. And it's like very liberating to feel that way because I don't always feel that way about like other work that I do. And I'm like, oh, I really want people to take this course. Or I really want people to do this. Or I really want people to do that. But with this, I'm like, like I am not going to force anyone to read this because I know you go through a journey while reading it, just as I did while writing it. And when you are ready, you will find it.
It's also really, I think, it's well suited to sit down and read through like in order, but it also feels like a book that you could just kind of like pick up and
Yeah.
thumb through and like pick a random page and just pick something out, and it could be like an interesting meditation for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit also about the writing, like what writing felt like to you throughout this, because I know you
Yeah.
said it's a lot of different versions of you. But so when I wrote
Mm-hmm.
my book, it's interesting you brought up the part about like people are like, oh, write 100 words for 100 day or whatever it is, right? I remember before I wrote my book, I talked to all these different authors and I asked them all like how they did it, right? Everybody gave me their secrets and they told me how they did it. They're like, oh, I sat down, I write my 500 words a day and that's that and the whole thing. And like, here's me not learning anything about being an ADHD individual, apparently, and trying to mimic these other people doing what they do. And so here's what actually happened. I didn't do that. I wrote 18,000 words the first weekend. And then I proceeded to take 6 months off. And then I wrote another 3,500. And then I took like a month off. And then I basically started writing like 2,000 to 5,000 words a weekend, like with gaps in between. That was like my process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Recently, one night, maybe like a month and a half ago, something like that, maybe 2 months ago, I shot up in bed in the morning, which is not a thing. I don't wake up mornings easily. And I just had a poem in my head.
Mm.
And I haven't written poetry since high school. Like, and it was like sad, depressed teenager
Mm.
poetry. And I woke up with a poem called An Ode to My Dreams.
Mm.
And I wrote it in like a minute, the whole thing. It was decent, like whatever. I don't know if I'm a good poet or not. I just write. But I felt it come out of me. And what
Mm.
happened after I did that is I felt like it opened up a valve. And what wound up happening is over the course of the next like month and a half, I wrote 47 poems.
Wow.
And I wrote 47 specifically because we are in a time where the number 47 is a particularly daunting number for me. But they were called Poetry of Necessity. But they just came to me. Like I would just be doing a thing and I would have a thought and a thing would float through my mind and I would just sit down and I would write it and it would just come pouring out of me. And I get the sense from reading your poems that there was little resistance in writing any of them, that it feels as you're reading them, that there's a flow to them that feels very effortless. I haven't read every poem in the book, but the ones that I read and the ones that resonated with me, it felt very much like there was a clear idea that sparked and then it
Yeah.
just flowed right to the end and you were like, there's an entry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, is that what your experience was like? Was
Yeah.
there any part of this that was difficult in writing these, or like what does poetry feel like to you when it happens?
Yeah, I think it's almost very similar to your experience. I always tell people writing this book is the easiest thing I've ever done. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't difficult. The
Mm-hmm.
places this book took me are some of the deepest valleys and the darkest places I've ever seen. And that was hard. But writing this book, I similar to you, I only wrote when that inspiration struck, right? So like none of this was written from force. Like I didn't have like, but I really honored it when that inspiration struck because I thought that it was this rare liquid gold that if I didn't like, it's like if I didn't prioritize that, then I would lose it.
Yeah, I have
And
that happen
so
all the time.
yeah, and that still happens to me, right? And I'm like, no, now 3 more weeks will go by before I even do anything. And so for me, it felt like when I was sitting there and say I was working, like working remotely on my computer, checking my emails, and in the middle of an email, if a thought or a word or a poem came to me, I would take out my notebook or take out my notes app and write it down. I wouldn't be like, oh, let me finish this email. I'd be like, nope, I will lose this if it doesn't happen right now. And sometimes I would stop and be writing thousands of words at one time and then come back to the email like 7, 8 hours later. But I knew that like I really, really honored whenever the inspiration came to me, because it didn't come to me every day. There were weeks I didn't write. There were months I didn't write. Like, it's not that it was like an everyday practice. It was like, but the more that I honored the inspiration, the more that it came, right? And similar to your 47 poems, like, I treated the writing process like I would a friend or a person. Like, it's like if a friend is knocking on your door and they're downstairs, do you tell them to wait a couple of hours?
Yeah.
No, like, you go downstairs and you greet your friend. And if your friend is like, "Hey, I have something important to tell you," or like, "Hey, I'm in the middle of like doing my taxes," you're like, "No, let's sit and have a coffee." Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, tell me about what's important. And then the more you have that relationship, the more your friend will knock on your door and be like, "Hey, here's a flower, here's a cup of tea, here's this." Like, but if you never open the door for your friend when they knock, why would they come back again?
That
Like,
is such a
why would they
wild
come
idea
back
to think of your
again?
creativity as a friend that comes by. It's like, because that feels like what it feels like. And the
Yeah.
idea also, like, when you let them in, they're going to keep coming back, especially
Yeah.
if you make them some tea and listen to what they have to offer, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because that is what in times throughout my life, and I'm curious about this because you mentioned in your book that you've been a writer for a long time. I remember in the story about like you were talking about food and love, and like somebody
Mm.
pointed out like you should be a cook, but you're a writer.
Mm.
Um, I've been a writer for a long time, and I've gone through a lot of different phases in my creativity and how often I've written and things like that. And I've noticed the more that I do it, the more that it's there. It's like sort of like it like a never ending candle. But like in
Mm.
the points where I'm in a hiatus, it's harder to get it going, and there's like a
Mm.
momentum there. Um, so I'm curious about your previous creative endeavors prior to this, how it either set you up for this and was similar, or how it was different. And that analogy of like the friend, was this a different friend that kept coming back, or was this like the same friend but showed up with different stuff?
For the book or
Yeah.
before? Um, I
Like when
think
you
it
think
was,
about previous
yeah.
creative endeavors to this one, like did this
Yeah.
feel like something very different from things you've, because you mentioned you didn't have a lot publicly written.
Yeah, no, I think it was the same friend. I felt like it was a lifelong friend, like a friend who knows you really well.
Mm.
Like, it wasn't a new friend. It was just like, you know how sometimes like you may have a friend who like you've known for a long time, but
Mm-hmm.
then you don't talk for them to them for a little bit, or maybe they go and live somewhere for 3 months, or maybe they have a kid or whatever it is, and they come back, and the essence of the person is the same,
Mm-hmm.
but the stories they tell you are a bit different, or the way that they're telling you is a bit different because they've been changed by the people they've loved and who have loved them. And so I think it was like that, like this, like the same friend who has been coming to me for years, but she had gone through different experiences that made her sound different, but I still knew her, or made her stories different, or they had a different rhythm to them, or maybe she wore a red scarf instead of a blue one, or maybe she didn't wear glasses, but um or she had yellow rain boots. I've always wanted one of those. And so it's like it's just the same person, but you forget that you know them.
Do you
Yeah.
plan on continuing? So you mentioned you don't have a lot publicly published aside
Yeah.
from the book. Do you plan to change that now? Like now that you've kind of scratched the itch, do you plan to publish more poems, more stories, write more
Yeah.
publicly?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so funny because towards the end of this book, when I was in the editing process is very different than the writing, as you know
Mm-hmm.
from your own book. Is like it's just an entirely it's like almost like a very logistical, detail oriented
Yeah.
part of your brain, whereas the writing is like visionary,
Ah,
broad
we
things,
just yeah.
creativity. And so when I was in the editing process, I was like, I have another book idea. And a friend's like, wait, let's just focus on this one first before
Yeah.
you
You're
focus
like,
on
I
the
want to get
next
back to
one.
creativity. Stop with the editing nonsense.
I
Yeah.
know. But I feel like I've been writing, and I think I have the same approach to this project as like when the inspiration strikes or when my friend knocks on my door, I will open it. But I won't force her to come in when she's not ready. Um, but it's fun. Like, it's fun having friends over and giving them tea, and when they bring over tea. When
Yeah.
it's a creativity as a friend, but also an actual friend.
Yeah. That makes sense. Um, in terms of the themes in your book, are there any that you think are the ones that you're most proud of having spent the time to explore and delve into? Because there are
Yeah.
a lot of them in there. And also, I just want to point out before I forget it, because I just looked over at my notes that I had of all the different things that I want to talk to you about. But I also just wanted to say that after trying to learn Chinese, like doing a year of Duolingo, I really appreciated the poem Chinese.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that. Um, but anyway, sorry. Themes though. Different themes that you explored in
Yeah.
here. Are there any? Because there's a lot about, I would say, like identity and tied back to like,
Yeah.
where we come from and who shapes us and all of that. And then there's a lot of like in the present and what shapes us and those sorts of things. And so much around like who we are and belonging and identity and things like that. And then all over the place and other things too. But like, what are the pieces that you felt like, you know what, I'm happy that I put this into the world and that I get to have contributed a verse in this space.
Yeah. I think the most honest answer is, well, there are two. One, I would say anxiety and belonging, but for two very different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for anxiety, for example, a big anxiety I had about the book was I didn't want people to know that I was anxious, or I didn't want people to know that I had anxiety. Um, I didn't want people to read this book and be concerned about me, because often, like, I write when I'm feeling heavier than when I feel lighter. When I'm having a great day in the sun, I don't want to write. I just want to have a great day in the sun, like, and so I think it's like this. There's a specific poem called My Grandmother is a Cat.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I'm curious about
No,
where
no, no.
you're.
So that's one where, like I told you, I couldn't read every poem in the book, um, it like I normally would before coming on to talk to someone about their book. And I saw the headline of that, and I was like, I'll come back to that one because I was kind of like, I can't imagine what this would be, and like there are certain ones where like I would flip to the title and I would be like, I don't know why, but I have to read this one
Uh-huh.
in this moment. And then there's others where I was like, I will come back to this one. I also found myself strangely drawn to the ones that were in, I think you wrote in both Spanish
Hmm.
and you wrote in a bunch of different languages in here, right? Like you wrote in English and Spanish. And then is that in Pakistani?
In Urdu, I wrote some lines. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Urdu. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, grandmother's a cat.
Grandma's a
Sorry.
cat. No, it's all about the premise is I'm having about to have an anxiety attack, and my roommate's cat jumps on my chest while I'm sleeping, or like comes to my chest, and like it's this intimate moment between my roommate's cat and I where I feel very supported by her, and I was so nervous about people reading this poem because I was like, I don't want people to know that am anxious, and like I don't specifically say panic attack, but if anyone has had a panic attack, they know from what's happening. It's probably a panic attack, right? And I was so anxious about people thinking I was anxious. And I was like, wait, this is exactly why it has to go in there. Because if I am anxious about people thinking I'm anxious, then me reading about someone being anxious will make me less anxious.
Mm.
So for me personally, I think the poems about anxiety, which are often in the blue chapter, I mean, there's like anxious thoughts everywhere, but in the blue chapter, I focus on that. But I link anxiety also. One of the reasons I say is this belonging, or like search for belonging, and I feel like that's a theme that I really explore in this book. I mean, it's in the title, right? I'm finding ourselves, each other, and things that make us come alive. Like that's belonging in like a poetic way.
Yeah.
But within that, I feel like often we center romance or like romantic partnerships when we think of belonging. Like, do I belong? Does he love me? Does she love me? Do they love me? But we sometimes don't think about community or the different, what does belonging mean in a non-romantic context. So I try to like bring in those ideas, and not just like, I mean, I talk about familial belonging and romantic belonging and friendship belonging, but like, what does it mean to belong to the world? What does it mean to belong to yourself? What does it mean to belong when you're walking by trees or by the ocean? Or what does it mean to belong when your neighbor brings you jam, or when you're standing next to someone watching the sunset together and you don't know them, or when you're having these micro interactions with people that are super mundane, but there's intimacy in the mundane. So what does belonging look like, not just to people, but to the world around you?
I came from a very small family, so reading all of your like deep connection to your family was like really beautiful, and it's one of the reasons why I always wanted to marry into a big family. Luckily, I did.
Mm,
I just found it like really beautiful. The thing that I also found now that I am married into a big family and I have more exposure to, I had a first marriage and second marriage, both big families, and I've had these different family experiences. There's so much in your book about. Um, I have a passage over here that I will read as our like closeout of the time we
mm,
have here together. But like one of the things that I just noticed was how much we learn about how we're supposed to behave, I guess, or
mm,
we learn about how those who came before us responded to things,
mm,
and how that shapes us.
mm,
Um, and so this is, I think, potentially a good point that I'll just close my part on, and then I'll let you offer some final reflections on anything. But um, I've seen this, and even though it's not my family, it's like my extended family. I've seen this. In my culture, we don't talk. We don't openly talk about trauma or grief or pain or sorrow. We don't talk about resilience. We just are. We feel it. We experience it. We sometimes sing about it. And like captured in that is both the repressing all of your stuff, the resilience of pushing through it, and then the leaning into the exuberance in spite of it, all in like this small piece here. And I don't have any of the like cultural uh, uh, like reasons why. Like my dad definitely didn't talk about his trauma or grief or pain or
mhm,
any of that stuff, right? Um, So I don't have that from the same place, but I just really appreciated how that gave the full spectrum of the experience of
mm,
this coming to terms with the
mm,
horrible stuff that happens to us and how we respond to it.
mhm,
Um, and I appreciated that it didn't just talk about how we push it down and we move through it, but also sometimes we sing about it. And I appreciated that part.
mm. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you see that too, and how the complexities within it, right? Um, can I read one last thing
Yeah,
that
of
kind
course.
of mirrors that?
That was my last like reflections, thoughts, things. I could definitely talk to you about this for a lot more, but for the sake of like breaking this into a single episode of chatting about it.
Of course.
But I also I am telling my wife very much that she is to read this book next because so much of it is just gonna like deeply resonate with her, and I think you two should have a conversation about it as well. I think you'd have a grand time talking about it.
Yay, we
But
love
yeah, so
that.
I wanted to leave the end for you to talk about, read anything. If there are any parts aside from this one that you want to read, go for it. Any of these that you want to share on this stream, please do.
I'm open. So I think the one that and these are I throughout the book I also am a big fan of animals and plants, and so throughout the book I have that those little factoids in there. And so they're all true also. Like I did research to figure out to make sure they were all true. But this one I feel like best summarizes the book. Um, and so I'll read one part and then I'll skip and read the next. Yeah. When monarch butterflies migrate in the fall, it takes them 3 to 5 generations before they reach their final destination. The butterfly that starts her tough journey is not the one who finishes it. Rather, it is her granddaughter or great granddaughter who bears the fruits of a warmer winter. Things don't change overnight. Journey is tough, and sometimes there is no path ahead. But butterflies trust themselves and that they will get there. It isn't just about her, but about the life forces that will come after her. And maybe, just maybe, one day her daughter or granddaughter won't have to fight the same battles that she did. I am slowly realizing that I am not the living dream of those who came before me. I'm living a dream they didn't even know they had. Because my ancestors didn't dream of love and liberation, they dreamed of food and water. Before dreaming of children who can dream, they dreamed of children who will live. Because for one to dream, one first has to live. Silencing was surviving, resistance only written into choruses of songs sung in circles. Before teaching a child to dream, you teach them to survive. So sweet silence was gifted to me with warm milk I never had to thirst for. But I was born screaming with a thirst for wonder and a hunger for opportunity that my grandmothers did not have the privilege of tasting. So here I am screaming. Here I am singing. For the dreams I have dreamed and not yet dreamed. For the dreams of the children that cannot be dreamed when they are too busy living. For the dreams of their children and their children and their children. For even if I do not live to see them live, I will die knowing that they will one day dream.
Which one is that?
That's at the very end. But there's also page 266.
Okay.
But then, can I read you the second part to that, just because it continues the butterfly analogy and it kind of wraps up what we were saying?
After that, can I also tell you the pages that I have dog-eared in here?
Absolutely. I would love that.
I want to tell you, I want you to know which ones they are.
Yes, I would be honored to know that.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Continue with the 266.
Okay.
Yeah.
266. Back to the butterflies. Once the monarch butterflies reach their final destination, this is also the coolest thing. There's another butterfly that is born, the super generation. This butterfly is able to make the entire journey back on her own. The sacrifices and journeys of those before her make her invincible. Some of us are butterflies who have benefited from the battles those before us fought. And at the same time, others are butterflies who are paving the way for others. Sometimes, at the same time, we are both the first butterfly and the last butterfly in this journey. We are all on this journey searching to feel a little warmer during the winter.
That's true. That's real.
Yeah, that's real. Isn't that crazy?
That is wild.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? It's actually
nuts.
Yeah, it's true. And so it's like a big thing to how can you think of yourself as a butterfly and know that, like, even if you don't accomplish all the things that you think you will in this lifetime, that you may be the third generation. Or sometimes you're like, oh my God, I cannot imagine what people before me have been through. Maybe you're like at the fifth generation, and maybe you're the super generation, right? We're all like at different points of our migration. But the wild thing about butterflies is that I always thought that butterflies, the same butterfly gets from Canada to Mexico, but it's like there are 3 to 5 generations that like are born and die and born and die, and each one wakes up knowing exactly where to go.
That's nuts.
Crazy.
Yeah. That's wild. That's incredible fun. And my daughter's obsessed with butterflies right now, so I now have a new
perfect factoid. Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to tell you all the pages that I have.
Okay, perfect.
So I dog-eared January 6th because that's just haunting. Martyrs, which I told you. And then I have 2 more that I would like you to read, if you would, before.
Of course. Tell me what.
And then I just dog-eared the last one you just told me. Okay. So page 108, The Weight of Silences.
Ooh. Okay. Perfect. Would you like me to read that one?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll read. It's in different languages, so I'll read that, and then I'll read the English one.
Cool.
And I'll read it, and I'm curious about your thoughts, and then I'll share mine, because I think this one is one of my favorites. The Weight of Silences. Kabi no tengo las palabras to tell you, Habibti uhubuki, wa aini. Mimi hua nawawiza wewe. Você significa muito para mim. Sometimes, I don't have the words to tell you, I love you, I miss you, I'm thinking of you, you really mean a lot to me. Because these few words tiene pesa, mushkil hai. Es más fácil preguntar, ni chulima, and hope you haven't. Nataka kukupikia, मेरे हाथ से आपके लिए Makul al-abaharat walalelan. Y todo el amor y cariño that I struggle to colocar en palabras for you. Because these few words have weight. It's hard. It's easier to ask, have you eaten, and hope you haven't. So I can cook for you, with my hands for you, with all the spices and colors and love and care that I struggle to string into words for you. I messed up. I said "aini," but I meant to say "washangni." It's an important difference in the Chinese
I
one, the
understood
first one.
why,
Yeah,
but
I like no. I wrote
yeah,
it's "washangni," but I was in was, yes.
so good. I understood what I need because
Yeah, it's
man reared in the
"washangni."
household. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
I
miss you.
love the part. These words have weight. It's hard. It's easier to ask, have you eaten, and hope you haven't, so I can cook for you. That is like so relatable.
Yeah, it's also like the reason I chose different words is like there's an English translation, but it doesn't capture the poem in the sense that like because you took Chinese, you know, like "你吃了吗?" It's the direct translation is "Have you eaten?"
Mm-hmm.
But no one really uses it like that. It's kind of like "What's up? How are you?"
Yeah,
So I was like, how do I translate that? Do I technically if you're going on Duolingo, it will translate it to like how's it going? What's up? How are you?
yeah,
Because that's like what the context is, right? But the actual translation is "have you eaten?" And that goes like to a history, you know, if you go into the history, you know, and why that was asked, or like the importance of food, or like a history of, you know, like you know, food insecurity during certain times, like
mm-hmm.
why it's so important. Similarly, like Habibti, like it's Habibti Hubuki, like I don't have the words to tell you. Um, I say I love you, but actually the Arabic says, my love, I love you. Right? It doesn't actually say, but when in English, when you say my love, I love you, it becomes a whole, it adds weight to it.
Yeah,
Whereas in Arabic, Habibti is what you say to the taxi driver. It's what you say
yeah,
when you're like, oh, can I have a napkin? Here you go, Habibti. Like it's not like this whole big thing. It's just light. So I was like,
yeah.
maybe I won't translate that because contextually it doesn't make it adds some weight to it that wouldn't normally be there if someone said that.
It's interesting. I almost feel like this is one of those circumstances where you would almost need like an artist note, like an artist statement
Yeah,
to go along with
exactly.
it, because
Yeah.
I didn't get any of that when I read it.
Hmm.
I just read the English translation. I didn't even notice actually that in the part that has other languages, that it's actually multiple other languages. I just saw the first line and was like, oh, I can't read that. There's the translation. And I read that. And I feel like the fact that the poem is the weight of silence, and it's about like not having the words and using so many different words that don't directly translate, is like in and of itself sort of like a meta commentary on what it's about.
Hmm.
And that
Exactly.
doesn't,
Yeah.
I didn't pick that up in my first read through.
And I think it's like it's A, okay not to pick it up, but B, that's also the point, right? If you don't pick it up, it's like this whole thing that love can't be picked up, or you can't, no matter how much you try, you can't pick it up,
Yeah.
right? So it's okay if you didn't pick it up.
Yeah. That's wild. I,
Yeah.
I, I would, yeah, I totally think an artist statement there would work.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
idea.
And then I absolutely love this one. Page 132. I wonder.
Oh, that's interesting. This is
Surprise
actually,
pick?
yeah, I just didn't expect that. That wasn't, I was wondering if I should even put that in there.
Oh, well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you did. It is, it feels slightly different from a lot of the stuff that's in here.
Yeah.
Um, and I also like that. I'll let you read it and then I'll tell you what I like about it.
I wonder if the bees know they are pollinating the flowers and helping us stay alive. I wonder if the rivers know they're satiating the thirst of the gazelles and the trees. I wonder if the trees know that the fruit that fills their branches also fills our plates. I wonder if the flowers know that their sacrifices fill our homes and altars with joy. I wonder if someday you and I will be able to see the difference we make in other people's lives too.
So I love that it is simple in like the premise of it, simple to understand. Everybody can get the message here. And what I really like is that the whole poem builds to the payoff at the end, which is that here are all of these things that nobody's thinking about it as they're doing it. They're just going through. And yet there's this whole other chain of events that takes place from it. It's just sort of like the natural consequences of being. And I like that it causes people, I hope, causes people to stop and think about how the little things on a day-to-day basis actually make those huge differences. And this was my point about like the, what I said about the thing your friend Maya said to you, that I'm stealing about the universes, that slight change in how you look at a situation changes how you show up, which then changes other people, which then changes. It's like that rippling effect of these small changes. I just really appreciated that the poem had a very like accessible simplicity to it with a very important message for people to think about and that they often don't think about.
I love that. Yeah. No, I love the way that you saw that.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well,
Yeah.
can I tell you why I saw that?
Tell me. Yeah.
Or why it related? So I wrote a post a while back called the asynchronous, I think it was called the asynchronous relationship between time and results, I think that's what it was called. I'll find it and fact check myself here. But the bottom line is this. I was sitting in a cafe called Cafe Olay, and I was having myself a breakfast sandwich. I think that's where I was at the time. I know I was having a breakfast sandwich. And I paused for a moment as I was eating my breakfast sandwich, and I looked at it, and I saw that I was eating fluffy eggs, cheddar, sausage on a croissant. And in that moment, for some reason, just like everything kind of zoomed out, and I thought to myself, okay, this croissant is the product of flour that was grown somewhere. It was harvested, it was processed, it was packaged, it was shipped somewhere, presumably to where it was baked, maybe in the cafe. There was butter associated with it. There was salt. There was all these things that came from all over. The eggs. Where were the eggs? The eggs came from maybe somewhere local, maybe somewhere not. It was driven with a truck, potentially, for hours to get to its destination, refrigerated. There was gas that had to be extracted from the earth to fuel that vehicle. There was the driver's time. There was like the cheddar that was made. How long was it aged? Was it a 30-day aging? Was it like, 6-month aged, sharp cheddar? And then there was like the chef who made these eggs that happened to be light and fluffy and delectable. How many years did this chef spend learning to make these eggs light and fluffy, and to be able to, how many eggs did he go through or she go through to get to the point where they could make such a fluffy, delightful egg sandwich for me? And that in that thing that I was holding in my hand and about to consume in less than 3 minutes, most likely, I was holding the result of potentially hundreds upon hundreds of hours and so many different processes and things. And I saw in that poem, similarly, like this system of things, this connection amongst all the different stuff, and that it's invisible most of the time. We just eat our breakfast sandwich and we don't even think about everything that goes into it. In the same way we go through our day and we don't think about how much our little actions may impact people in very profound ways.
Yeah, exactly that. And also, like, how can we live a life where we realize how interconnected we are and how our actions impact people?
Yeah.
Right? And what does it mean to let ourselves do that? Like, what does it mean to like go out of our way for people?
Yeah.
Because we know how much of a difference it can make, especially if we don't realize, like, if it's like what you said, if you don't realize how much of a difference like the egg is making or like the sausage is making, then like imagine how it would be if you actually were intentional, or we were actually intentional about the, like how we show up in the world. It would change everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was phenomenal getting to spend some time with you and chat about your book. I'm so proud of you for having written it and for putting it out in the world and for putting yourself out there this way. For anybody that is watching or listening at later point in the future or currently, Songs of My Grandmother by Sara Surani. And it is a phenomenal book. And I really do mean that. And I'm excited to go back through and read all the poems that I didn't read. but I totally miscalculated when I picked it up. I was like, I bet I could like read this whole thing before like, and I just was like, nope. That's not going to happen. This requires pause at different parts to like really like think and absorb some of this because, you know, it's sort of like instead of taking 3 minutes to eat my egg sandwich, like sometimes you should take 6 or 10. Really appreciate every bite, right? And I felt like your book deserved better than a speed read from me. It deserved, as I read different poems and I was like, that's incredible. I couldn't speed read my way through the rest of them. I couldn't flip through it and show up with a half-hearted understanding of some of them. I wanted to just take the ones that I got the chance to experience and come and talk with you about them. But I definitely plan on reading through all of them. And, thank you for writing them. I'm really genuinely excited to give it to my wife. I think she's going to absolutely love it.
Thank you.
And I look forward to dog-earing more pages for her to read specifically.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Oh, and where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me on my website. It's www.sarasurani.com. You can find me on Instagram at Sara Surani. I'm the same on LinkedIn and Facebook, but I feel like the best way to get a hold of me is my Instagram and my website.
Cool. And that's Sara, S-A-R-A, no H.
No
right?
H.
S-A-R-A, and then S-U-R-A-N-I.
That is correct. S-A-R-A-S-U-R-A-N-I.
Beautiful. Well, everyone go check out Sara and go check out the book. And thanks for spending time with me. How does this thing work that I'm on? I haven't done this in a while.